Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 14 of Double Take. I'm Alex Safey, here with my brother, John, not Jonathan, Johnny boy, Safey. John, what's going on, bro?
Wow, it's episode 14. We're chugging along.
Yeah, we are chugging along.
On our way, our 100th episode.
On our way to the NBA playoffs, hopefully soon too, which should give us a lot of good content.
Yeah, obviously at the beginning of this quarantine, we have not been able to. There was really nothing to talk about, but now it's fun. Like even though the league hasn't restarted, there's no games yet. It's like there's content with like the bubble, and we can get into all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the bubble, John, because today's episode, we are going to be giving our top 10 greatest teams of all time. We're going to do, you could call it a draft format. Maybe it's not a draft format because John was telling me that draft is more competitive, but we're basically compiling a list in which we're alternating picks and saying which teams that we think were the greatest and giving you our reasons. But before that, we did want to preview before we start with the actual episode, I wanted to talk about the bubble with John, because there's been a lot of as the NBA players in the last week or two have started arriving to the bubble in Orlando. There's been a lot of good content on Twitter, on just everything that's going on now. On YouTube, there's a couple of vlogs. So John, tell me what you've thought. Who is it? Matisse Thybulle, right, on the pictures?
I think I would start. That's kind of my first. If you just ask me what am I thinking about the bubble right away, I just think it's such a unique thing that's going on right now. Like just as a sports story, and it's funny because I tell people, like, when I'm on the phone with a friend or a family member, whoever, and they know I'm into basketball, they might ask about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, well I don't know if you've heard, but like the season's coming back. It's gonna be in Disney World. They're like, what? Like it's like such an interesting thing that I feel like the regular person doesn't really even know that's going on that much. I feel like even my mom, who she listens to us argue about this all the time, Alex. And I feel like even a few weeks ago, maybe the plan had already been out for a while, and we probably have to explain to her. But it's just something that's crazy that's going on. Like there's no other bubbles going on, but for the season, for the sake of the business side of the NBA, they need to come back for the sake of the basketball side. And there's all these reasons why, the league wants to come back, of course, and to take people's mind off what's going on. It's good to have sports back, but the fact that they're doing this is so much, and just getting to see through the vlogs of JaVale McGee and Matisse Thybulle, two different players. One, JaVale plays for the Lakers, Thybulle plays for the Sixers. It's really cool to see all the thought and specifically the technology that goes into this, like the little bands that they're wearing to make sure that the band is like basically their everything, their room key. They have to, every time they go into another room or another building, they have to scan it into another practice. It says that they've been tested within the past 24 hours. It says that they don't have any symptoms, which they have to do their symptoms by taking their temperature and like their blood and their pulse and
the oxygen
levels. That's what it is. They have to do all that every single morning, and then they they have to put the their temperature into an app, a digital app, right, on their phone, and then that goes to, I guess, the league, and the league gets it, and then when they go through with their bracelet, they have to beep it like in every single place that they go. So the whole thing is so like technological and everything. It's cool.
Thybulle just released like the third episode this morning, and the cool thing I saw about like the bracelet and the symptoms and everything was he said that if they don't report like what their temperature was and what their oxygen percentile was, percentage, whatever, I don't know what exactly the term is.
Yeah.
But if they didn't report that, they're not allowed in any other buildings. Like when they try to scan in, it basically blocks them out.
Right.
So, which is, it's good to see that there's all these precautions being taken with how the NBA was going about it. Because obviously the first concern when the league proposed this idea was, is it going to be safe?
Right, like 22 teams, all the staff and media and personnel that goes into this, it's a lot. And, that is like the first thing I did think about was, wow, how cool is this? And the second thing is like kind of the first responses to some players. Specifically, the first one I remember was Troy McDaniels, like posting a picture of the food, and it was like in a little box and some plastic containers. There's like a fruit in a container, and it just looks like it's not good because, let's face it, all these NBA players who are making millions of dollars a year all probably have really nice personal chefs at home. And now they're going into this bubble, right, where it's in the middle of a pandemic. And guess what? They're eating like regular people food, like food that just everyday people eat that aren't
and
not that nice.
I love that it's kind of an additional aspect of like, I don't really call it adversity because obviously like that's the main thing is like, you know, these players, they're safe and they have food and they have a bed. Like it's not huge adversity.
They're a little uncomfortable.
They're uncomfortable and it's going to separate the boys from the men. You know, I want to give a shout out to our favorite player on the Heat right now, Jimmy Butler. And he said, his quote was, "This is easy. When you look at what's important, we do get to eat. We do get a roof over our heads. For a lot of people, it could be worse. For a lot of us, it has been worse. I'll speak for our team. We're cool with it." Because that was basically someone asked him something in response to a lot of the players kind of, you know, making jokes about how the food wasn't very good.
Heat culture.
And heat culture, exactly. # heat culture. And then the other thing is like, it's really cool that all these guys are kind of in the same boat. Like no one gets specialty treatment. Like LeBron has the same exact, you know, conditions and living conditions and food that, you know, Quinn Cook at the end of the bench has, or even a guy on like a lesser team has, you know? So it's that's another very cool thing.
Another aspect, like you brought up LeBron, and one thing I just remembered was Kemba Walker. He was being interviewed for, I don't know if it was probably ESPN or whoever it was.
Might have been Bleacher Report. But
Bleacher Report, I think I saw it on Bleacher Report, and they were asking about the bubble, and he's like, yeah, you know, it's just really cool, like, and a lot of the things that people are talking about is how it has like this AAU tournament vibe. Like when all these players were younger playing basketball, of course, like they would go to these, you know, these tournaments in like places like Orlando, and all the players would be in one hotel and you're all walking around and you're there for like whatever, a week, 2 weeks, how many ever weeks the tournament maybe is. And Kemba was saying, yeah, you know, like it's crazy. Like I saw Bron walking around and like, when do you, like, I never see LeBron just walking around by himself because there's no fans. Anyone who's in the bubble is like a media member, an NBA executive, or NBA person who works for the NBA, or someone who works for the team. So like trainers, coaches, etc. So it's like,
so no one's really running up to LeBron like for an autograph, you know?
Exactly. And another thing was that I forgot who it was. I want to say maybe it was like, it might have been Kemba or JJ Redick or one of these players who's speaking about it. But he was saying how the first thing that happens when you fly somewhere to play, you know, an away game is you go to the hotel and you're just everywhere you're going. Like you get off the plane, there's a fan trying to get autographs in the hotel, autographs, whatever. This is like, you know, you're isolated. Like you get on the plane, you fly there, did all the testing protocols and everything before you get into the bubble. Then you have to quarantine yourselves, I think, for like the first one is like 24 hours, I believe, that the players have to go through to make sure that they tested negative before they're allowed to walk around and everything. Of course, they're wearing masks. Another cool thing was in the vlogs that JaVale and what's his name, Matisse Thybulle posted or put on YouTube, which I encourage you guys to go check them out because it's really cool. Matisse Thybulle says, he's like, yeah, I edit this myself, for those of you who don't believe it, but I get it. Like he has a lot of time on his hands. And he's like, yeah, I'm getting a lot of like, you know, publicity and support for it. Like the LA Times reached out to me, the New York Times reached out to me. Like they want it. It's a cool story. But in the thing, it showed like the NBA gave them like a bunch of snacks when they got in, you know, entertainment. So there's like, they gave them tablets and like the Roku stick, which has like Netflix and Hulu and all that different stuff. Yeah. And then they had one bag filled with like masks, which is pretty cool. Like all these NBA like masks basically. So they have to be wearing masks when they're walking around.
Yeah, they're gonna be set up pretty nicely. But one more thing on like the safety of it, and when I saw this, I kind of was frustrated and one of the reasons I thought there should only be less than 22 teams was for this reason. What I'm about to say was Rashawn Holmes. He's on the Sacramento Kings, so a very irrelevant team right now.
Yeah, no way they have like no shot of me.
Exactly. So an irrelevant team, an irrelevant player on an irrelevant team broke the bubble. He broke quarantine, or not quarantine. He broke. I think he left the premises or something. He went to go pick up.
He left the bubble. Yeah.
He left the bubble. He went to go pick up food from like a Postmates driver or something, and so he had to go into quarantine for I don't know, like 8 days or something like that.
10 days.
Okay, 10 days. But it's like I saw that. I'm just like, really? Like this is literally why I understand that 22 teams, more teams equals more money. But I was just like there's teams like that you don't need the extra, because you had 2, 3, 4 more teams, and that's like probably that's
more likely to have this.
Let's that's probably like 100 more people. You know, that's a ton more people, including the players, the staff, the the team personnel, the coaches.
He said it was an accident, though, Alex.
Yeah. Okay. I forgive you.
But it's just funny because then Kelly Oubre like tweeted back at him and he said, it wasn't in response to this because I think this story came out right after. But Kelly Oubre said, to all my NBA bros, Postmates delivers to the hotel. You just have to go outside and meet the delivery person at the hotel entrance. Security will not hold the food for you or help you. Yeah, the food whack, but we are here for a bigger purpose. Hope that helps. And this is a guy at the bottom, the worst team right now that's in the bubble of the 22 is the Phoenix Suns, who have like a point something % chance to make it into the playoffs, so they're probably not going to. But it's kind of goes down to what you said. And I know Bill Simmons, he's like, I wish it was just 14 teams. And I think 14's that's definitely small because you're just saying
that's a bit small.
You're cutting the playoffs. You're giving the 1 seed a bye, which that kind of changes the format. So I think they had to at least have 16. But the thing was, and this is what Chris Haynes said, he was on the Bill Simmons podcast. He's a media guy he went to the ball pretty early. He's like, yeah, but the league obviously wanted to have Zion and the Pelicans in because they're going to bring – like us watching Zion brings so much more money to the league, of course because more people are going to want to watch that. So then when you put the Pelicans in, there's the teams that are like, 2 games away, 3 games away from the Pelicans where they could argue and say, hey, why do the Pelicans get to go in? Like, we're just
what the answer to the NBA should say? You know why? Because you don't have Zion Williamson on your team.
Yeah, which it's funny, but and also I would say the Portland Trailblazers, which interestingly enough, Chris Haynes, who he used to cover the Blazers, he's like, oh, this is the most dangerous team. If they can get into the play-in game and get into the playoffs, as an 8 seed against the Lakers, like that's a dangerous matchup, whatever. Which he sold me because Nurkic is healthy now. CJ and Damian are hungry, and Zach Collins, I think, was injured too. So there's these other teams that had injuries.
They did lose Trevor Ariza, though. They lost Trevor Ariza.
And then with the Lakers, we saw Rondo being kind of a drama queen, and he posted his hotel room and said Motel 6, which, okay, just come on, bro. Like, chill out. Also, it's a pandemic. Like, it could be a lot worse, and you're complaining about the king-size bed you have, like, in this – and it's a big room, too, obviously.
Yeah.
And Rondo actually ended up injured in practice. So he got his wish. Now he left the bubble because he's not going to finish the season with the team. And Avery Bradley also, I don't remember why, but 2 Lakers.
Avery Bradley, I think it was because he didn't want to be away from his family for 2 months.
And he didn't want to win a championship. Wow.
So, well, if they win, he's still getting a ring.
I guess so. But they replaced those guys. They signed J.R. Smith, and I think I saw Deion Waiters at a practice, right?
Deion Waiters has been on their team.
Right. Okay. I totally
forgot. They signed him, I think it's when they signed him, and then they literally, that's when, like, the NBA shut down.
Yeah, okay, so this was months ago, right. So they have those 2 guys, but we'll see what happens with the Lakers. I think that's still my pick to take it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm feeling good about the Bucks. There's a lot of things going around with the Lakers, but, never doubt LeBron.
We got the sleeper teams as well. Like, we heard Jimmy Butler there were some noise complaints because he was dribbling in his room at like 4 a.m. So go Heat.
Go Heat.
We got about less than 2 weeks left, or
it's
about 2 weeks until the bubble.
We're gonna have we'll have a full preview episode probably in a week or 2. But without any further ado, John, let's get to the greatest teams of all time. Give me a rundown of kind of what maybe our criteria is and how we're gonna be picking and things like that.
Yeah. So a lot of times I see these lists, and I think other people do this wrong because they'll have like the 96 Bulls and then the 97 Bulls. Like, no, to me, it's like those teams are very similar. They're only a year apart, but I would even expand that. And then people can disagree with me here. I want to expand that to say you can only pick one iteration of that team. So like, I don't even want to have like the 91 Bulls and the 98 Bulls. Even those teams are 7 seasons apart. I still think they're led by the same coach, the same number 1 guy, and the same number 2 guy, and a few of the same role players in there. Obviously, Horace Grant with Dennis Rodman is a switch. But to me, it's like, all right, of course we could just say our top 10 teams, so the first 6 of them are the Bulls with Michael Jordan. Like, okay, I'm sure we wouldn't say that, but someone could have a top 10 in which you do that, and you only argue that.
True.
Well, the only other teams that make it are the 01 Lakers and the 86 Celtics. Like, no. Like, so for me, our criteria, we're going to say only one iteration of that team. So that's like you can't pick the 17 and the 18 Warriors, for example. And then also it depends on like what your personal criteria is. But my order personally is most dominant. And when it comes down to it, if we're saying, oh, this team over that team for the 5th spot, I kind of do it in my head as who would win like head to head in a 7-game series. So that's part of it. But also dominance matters in their current era they played in.
And with that, I think it's important to, like, I guess we're somewhat operating under the same like criteria and stuff. It's important to consider what they did during the regular season, what they did during the playoffs, and then who actually, of course, is on their team, who's running their team. And yeah, I think it's also important who would actually win head to head. But then matchups can be kind of, they can get confusing, but whatever. So,
and lastly, one last thing too, because you brought this up to me when we were talking about a team that won 11 championships, the Celtics in the 60s, right?
Okay.
We're talking about just one single season team. So we can't just say, oh, it's the 65 Celtics because they won 11 titles or whatever. No, we're saying it's the team of one single season. So we're not going to count a team higher because they won 11 titles. It's just one season. How great was that team? So without any further ado, I think this is an obvious number one. It's as close to an undisputed number one in sports as there is. I think it's more undisputed that this is the best team and that Michael Jordan is the best player. And that's the 2017 Golden State Warriors. And obviously this, started when the season before this team broke the record for regular season games by winning 73 games in the regular season. And then they won 15 in the playoffs before they choked. They were up 3-1. They lost 3 games straight to the Cavaliers.
So that's what is that, 88?
So they won 88 games total. That is the record for most games won in any season, right? So it would have been 89 had they won, but they won 88 games, okay? So 15 in the playoffs, 73 in the regular season. Then, of course, they choke, and they lose to the Cavaliers in the finals. This then leads to this historical team, one of the greatest regular season team of all time, upgrading their small forward position.
From Harrison Barnes.
Harrison Barnes, who averaged just about 12 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, and he shot 46% from the field. Okay, so pretty good. With an MVP, Kevin Durant, who is a fairly consistent near 30-point per game scorer, 50, 40, 90 guy. That year, I think the year before, so 2016, Durant averaged 57%. So he was 11% better shooter, and he averaged like 8 points. So they went from 12 points per game to 28 points per game at their small forward position. And of course, he literally is like Harrison Barnes is just a much, much, much worse version of what KD is.
Exactly. And let me say one more thing about that upgrade before you finish your argument for them being the number one team. They went from another Harrison Barnes, probably league average type of guy. They went from that to a literal MVP caliber player
in his prime
when they already had the back-to-back MVP. So you have the 2015 and 16 MVP, Steph Curry, back-to-back, the first unanimous MVP. He's probably at least he's top 3 in the league. At that time, you would have said it's LeBron. You would have said it's Steph. And then the next guy would have been KD, if you don't believe KD's better than both of those guys.
Yeah.
So now you have 2 of the top 3 players in the league at the same time on a team that had already been to back-to-back finals.
Yeah. So I think that's the crazy thing is like you could use that argument and you can compare that, just having those 2 guys to any other team. And we've never really seen that anywhere. Like I know in the Last Dance doc, they were like, oh, Scotty was like, the second best guy in the league. But, we asked some old timers, and they were saying, nah, it wasn't really like that. Obviously, they're trying to change the history up a little bit, but that wasn't legit how it was. There was Hakeem and Clyde and other guys that people thought were better than Scotty. So there's really no team that's had 2 of like the top 3 best guys in the league at one time.
Maybe the only other ones you could say is the 01 Lakers or that Lakers team with Shaq and Kobe. And then right when
you could say Magic and Kareem, but Kareem was obviously older.
No, I don't think so.
He was older. They had rookie Magic and MVP Kareem, and then when MVP Magic was paired with like 39-year-old Kareem. So they weren't on their peaks at the same time. But these are 2 guys, MVP players, playing at the same time, both in their prime, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just those 2. But then it's the most stacked team ever because not just those 2 guys. Then they have 2 more All-Stars in their starting lineup with the Defensive Player of the Year, Draymond Green, and a top
he wasn't Defensive Player of the Year.
In 2017, he was.
Oh, he was? Okay.
Huh? So a defensive player of the year, Draymond Green, and a top 5 greatest shooter ever. Maybe the second best shooter ever, only after Steph, right? And
Yeah.
Klay Thompson.
So you had the 3 best shooters in the league. And I think with Klay and Draymond, it's important to note they're the best 3 and 4th best player on a team. Like we've never seen a better.
Yeah.
And it's such a dumb thing to say because no one even thinks the best 3 and 4. But if you like started a new team with them too as like your best players, you'd probably be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And what I'll say about them too is like you have because it's not always easy to just throw 4 amazing players onto the same team and have it work. But the thing about those 4 players specifically is that they did really fit well together. Of course, they had another great coach in Steve Kerr. But with Klay and Draymond, they're all-stars, but they're all-stars who can play off the ball or can fill the gaps that Durant and Curry where they're slacking. They play defense. Draymond can pass and rebound. And then Klay Thompson doesn't even need to dribble the ball.
Yeah. Literally, he scored 37 in the quarter with 10 dribbles in that whole game. It was unreal.
Crazy.
So just already stacked. With those 4 guys, you're already winning the title. But then you go down their bench, which isn't even that bad, which they did give up some of their bench players so that they could sign Kevin Durant. But if you go on their bench, they had a very formidable one starting with a 6th man in Andre Iguodala, who is a former All-Star, a champion, and somehow he was a Finals MVP in 2015.
Yeah.
Other role players, Sean Livingston, who was a really nice backup point for Steph, fit well with the team. And then they had guys like Zaza Pachulia, David West, McGee, rebounded well, played defense. And then they even signed Matt Barnes, another nice, solid veteran role player after KD was hurt for a little bit in March. I think it was like a 2-week injury. So this team is all just together, going in with a number 1 offensive rating, number 2 defensive rating of all the 30 teams. They go into the playoffs, and to me, a theme that I think I see with a lot of these teams in our top 10, Alex, is like hunger. This is the most motivated team ever on top of how stacked they are because they were so focused. They didn't even care about the regular season. So, yeah, they lost 6 more games than they did the year before.
They still won
67 games. Right, but they didn't win 73 like the team before. That's why it's because they didn't care if they dropped a game to the Wizards during the regular season or even the Heat. Shout out to the Miami Heat who beat them that season, right? Yeah. They lost to the Spurs and the Grizzlies, a few of these regular season teams that are just bigger down low. But they got to the playoffs and it just proved that they solely cared about winning the championship. They went 16-1. They swept the entire West. They were 12-1 in the Western Conference. They get to the finals, go up 3-0 against the Cavaliers, right, which is a great Cavs team with LeBron, Kyrie, Kevin Love, all the good. Of course, everyone thinks this game was kind of a little bit rigged. The refs everything was going
the Cavs
way.
I mean, the Cavs did blow them out. But
they did, but the Cavs also broke the record for most 3-pointers in one finals game.
Yeah, but which is like crazy. Which actually
literally
proves
what it took to beat the team once.
Exactly, and which proves how good that Cavs team was that they made light work of. They demolished LeBron and the Cavs team. That might have been the best Cavs team LeBron was on. Honestly, I think it might have been better than 2016.
I might have said so, yeah. And so it's all that, and then again they go 16-1. They started off 15-0. So a team has never won 15 straight games in the playoffs. They lost the one, and then they finished off in Game 5. And like I said, the motivation after after losing 3-1, and not only did the Warriors lose, Kevin Durant lost 3-1. So he was hungry in that playoff series as well. So all of them are hungry and they're super stacked. It's easily number 1 choice.
Yeah, I think that's definitely number 1 as well. But number 2, however, contrary to popular belief, I do not think the first or second best team is the 96 Bulls. Okay, I think the next best team is the 2001 Lakers. And I guess, so if we talked about our criteria, if you want to go off of compiling from day one, from the regular season to the playoffs, maybe it's not this team. Maybe it is. You have to take the Bulls because of their 72-10 season. I'm taking the Lakers team because while their regular season was not as impressive as 72-10, obviously, their playoffs, in my opinion, that's the best playoff run probably ever or not best. It's the most dominant playoff run ever. The Warriors were 16-1, but the next one would be 15-1, the Lakers. And So let me just read. This is an excerpt from the Book of Basketball. It's Bill Simmons' book. And he had a list. He ranks all his best teams too. But he's talking about this 0-1 Lakers team. And he says, the 0-1 Lakers swept a 50-win Blazers team that nearly beat them the previous spring. They swept a 55-win Kings team that almost beat them 12 months later. And they swept a 58-win Spurs team that won 3 titles in the next 6 years. And then they came within 1 overtime loss of sweeping the 56-win Sixers, which made them one of the only 2 NBA champions to beat 4 straight 50-win playoff teams. So, yeah, they went 15-1. They didn't go 16-1. They had that 1 loss, but they beat 4 straight 50-win teams, and they swept most of them. And then you have the gentleman's sweep in the finals, and that's the game that Iverson famously stepped over Tyronn Lue after breaking his ankles. But one more thing that I'll say, after that's the outline of their accomplishments. But that team, you have Shaq and Kobe, and you have prime Shaq towards the end, not towards the kind of the end of his prime. Like that's probably mid-prime Shaq. And then you have Kobe, who's just approaching his prime, which actually worked perfectly because if you had prime Kobe, his head's probably too big.
It probably wouldn't have worked together.
It probably wouldn't have worked as well. I mean, the next few years we saw that team ended up breaking up because you just have 2 alpha dogs, and it didn't work. With this team, luckily you have Shaq, who's, the best player in the league at that time. And then you have Kobe, who's just approaching it. But you have Phil Jackson, who's like they call him the Zen master. And he's kind of like this, kumbaya, let's all work together. And of course, he's probably the only coach who could have coached that team and had the success that he did with them. But just to look at their numbers too, Shaq in the playoffs was giving you 30 points, 15 rebounds, 3 assists. Kobe was giving you almost 30 points. He's 29 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists. So those 2 guys, John, you said Curry and Durant, probably the 2 best players to ever play together. Kobe and Shaq, I think, you could argue they're also the best, but maybe they're number 2, if not.
So what did they win in the regular season then?
I think they won they had some injuries, and I think they won like they were right under 60.
Yeah, I'll look it up right now. Yeah, so they didn't win 60 games. So 56. So I guess you're putting a lot of weight on that, on what they did in the playoffs. My thing is, so I'll just get to my pick for what I would take as the number 2 best team after the 17 Warriors. But I guess I'm taking on 3 on our list because you just took the 0-1 Lakers, which has to be the 96, 72-10 Chicago Bulls, led by Michael Jordan, of course. And my thing there is, so I guess obviously you're putting a lot of weight on the fact they were 15-1 in the playoffs. But if you look at their actual roster, look at what this Bulls team started off 14-1. Yes, they were 14-1 going into game 4 of the finals, right? And then in 4 and 5, those were the games where Gary Payton said, I want to guard MJ, and you see MJ's numbers go down, right?
Yeah.
And then but MJ says, listen, there was no problem there. We were up, they had won 14 games out of 15 games in the playoffs, and they dropped a few games on the road just to come back for game 6 in Chicago. It's on Father's Day. MJ is very emotional about his dad. The series was never in question. So if you want to take those 2 games, this team ends up going 15-3 in the playoffs and say, listen, if they had not lost those 2 games and they had just won game 4, then yeah, they're better than the Lakers. But to me,
I actually don't think that.
Come on. It's like they were 72-10. It was just pure dominance. And then what they did was pretty much be just as dominant in the playoffs, except for dropping those 2 games to, let me say, a 63-win team. But in the Eastern Conference Finals, they swept 4-0 a 60-win team led by Shaquille O'Neal and led by Penny Hardaway, obviously. So a young team that was great that beat them the previous season. So they come in, and to me, again, it's a story about hunger. And MJ was hungry. He three-peated. He went and played baseball for a little bit, and then they got beaten by that team. They had to, lick their wounds, come back, get back in basketball shape because MJ was more of a baseball player. They come back, sweep the league, winning 72 games, breaking the record. and then they start 14-1 in the playoffs, drop those 2, finish 15-3. So they won 87 games total. They're just pure dominance.
But here's what I think, John, is two things. One, when I look at the 72-10, it doesn't mean as much to me because, one, we saw a team break that record. And then two, that was obviously during the years. That was during the time that that there was like a league expansion. Like in the past, like the previous like 5 seasons, the league had added like 5 new teams, which obviously there's going to be a dilution of the talent, and the teams that they're playing night to night aren't as good. Then another thing, you mentioned those 2 games they lose to the Sonics. If they beat the Sonics in those games, then they're close. They do have the best playoff record ever.
They'd be 15-1. They would be.
Would they be 16-1?
15-1. No, because the first round was still 3 games.
Okay, it was still 3 games. So they're 15-1. That would have been the second best after now the Warriors have the 16-1. But then, so yeah, it's pretty close. Is it very close with the 96 Bulls, the 0-1 Lakers? Of course it's close. But then I say, well, who do I think would actually win in like a 7-game series? I really would pick the Lakers. I don't think – because you look at, of course, you have MJ and Scotty, and then you have Rob. That team is a great defensive team, and then MJ and Scotty are kind of carrying the offensive load. But who is stopping Shaq? Like, who is stopping? Like,
okay. So just hear me out.
Shaq demolished so many centers that season.
Okay, well, listen. I'm just going to tell you the 3 centers they went up against, or the 3 big men. Number 1, they played the Miami Heat in round 1. Okay, Alonzo Mourning. Not the best center of all time, right?
Oh my
but he's pretty good. Swept. Then they go 4-1 against the New York Knicks with Patrick Ewing. Then they sweep Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway. So I get it.
That's
Shaq
baby
was
Shaq.
so young.
That's baby
Shaq. He got better, I know. So I'm not saying any of those centers are close to as good as what Shaq became. But listen, they went 3-0 against the Heat and Alonzo Mourning, 4-1 against Pat Ewing and the Knicks, and then 4-0 swept Shaquille O'Neal and Baby Shaq and the Magic, right? And then they go up against Sean Kemp, who was a little bit shorter. He wasn't a 7-footer, but he was still an athletic stud, great power forward in the league. That team, like I said, they won 63 games, and they literally near sweep all those teams, right? So now you're saying, okay, give Kobe, give prime Shaq. They're gonna give them a run for their money, but I'm gonna give the 7-game series. I'm gonna give the nod to the Bulls on that one.
Yeah, no, I just think it comes down to Shaq is literally unstopped. Like, who are you more likely to stop? Like Jordan or Shaq? Yeah, I know it might sound crazy to say you can even do anything close to stopping Jordan. You're not gonna stop Jordan, but we saw that Jordan, play poorly in the last 3 games of the Sonic series. So we've seen Jordan, and maybe that's an off game, whatever. With Shaq, Shaq averaged 30 and 15.
But listen, you're up 3-0 in the NBA Finals. You know you're going to win it. So after that, fine. MJ had a few stinkers. I do credit Gary Payton, but at the same time, when we're having this hypothetical conversation for all-time players going at each other, MJ's not going to slow down. But that's fine. We disagree here.
I just still think you're not stopping Shaq. There's nothing you can do. And then you have, and then I haven't even mentioned Kobe. Like, yes, MJ and Scotty could probably do a decent job on Kobe, but just the combo of Shaq and Kobe, I just think is better than.
So fine, you can say all time the most lethal offensive duo. I would agree there, and they would probably be my number 3 team after the Bulls. But the one duo that's interesting enough that is better than them, Steph and KD, I would probably say offensively, and then MJ and Pippen. The thing with that team, MJ, Pippen, I didn't even mention Rodman, who's averaging 15 rebounds a game. With those 3 dudes, they're putting the clamps on anybody. So Kobe, I don't know how well Kobe's doing against the 96 Bulls when he's got Scotty on him. And MJ, is taking a rest and guarding, I guess, I don't know, Derek Fisher. Right? So, I don't know. The wings are stacked. Yeah, they don't have anyone to stop Shaq, but I would still give the nod to that team. So, Alex, who do you got number 4 on this list?
So, number 4, this team, there's a couple of good options, but I think it's pretty clear. I have to go with the 1986 Celtics, although I hate to say it because, screw Boston, but screw the Celtics and Boston fans. But to give a little background before I give my argument. So that was a team they had won. They have obviously Larry Bird. They win the title in 1984 against the Lakers. Then there's a rematch in 85, and in 85 the Lakers win. So now They're coming back the 86 no, it's the 85 off season before the 86 season. And they're of course hungry because they want to beat the Lakers, and that was of course the most heated rivalry of probably the NBA ever.
Yeah,
and
I would say
so
so.
what they did is they trade Cedric Maxwell for Bill Walton, who Bill Walton, for those of you who don't know, he had won the Finals MVP in like the late 70s for the Portland Trailblazers.
And he won an MVP in his career.
Yeah, he was
He
a
was an
Finals MVP and an MVP.
but he was injured.
But of course, he had like a ton of foot problems, like many foot surgeries. And they make that trade. He totally rejuvenates their team. And he ends up actually winning Sixth Man of the Year that season. But what he did for that team is that team was just an incredible passing team. Of course, you have unselfish players like Bird, McHale, who are just great passers. But then Bill Walton, who's a center, was also an incredible passer.
And off the bench.
Yeah, and he's coming off the bench too. So, and that was just one of the teams that, like, you could tell. I mean, I'm basing some of this off of the Lakers Celtics, like ESPN documentary, whatever. It just looked like they were having a ton of fun too. They really liked playing together. So I think that matters. But so looking at their team, they have 5 Hall of Famers. They had Bird, McHale, Robert Parrish, Bill Walton, and then Dennis Johnson. And then their accomplishments, they were 67-15. They were 40-1 at home, John. They only lost 1 game at home, which is the NBA record.
That is the record, yeah.
Then they're 15-3 in the playoffs. I think the Lakers took 2 games from them. So, not as good as 15 or 16-1, but they did. They pretty much swept through the East. They swept Jordan in the first round. That was the year that Jordan goes for 49 in game 1 versus them in round 1. And then he goes for 63 in game 2. But still, like, Jordan was doing that, and the Celtics were making light work.
Right. I mean, that Bulls team was nothing. But obviously, the 86 Celtics were gonna beat that team.
Also, I need to make a correction. I totally was wrong about this. They didn't play the Lakers in the finals. I forgot to say that. So the 2 games they lost were actually against the Houston Rockets. So they're all year long. They're looking, we want the Lakers. We want the Lakers. We want the Lakers. Bill Walton, I actually in the documentary, he said, like, he'd be like lifting weights and he'd be just saying Kareem. Or no, he'd be saying Jabbar. He was saying Jabbar, because he really wanted to play Kareem and beat Kareem. And of course, I think they sweep through the East pretty much. Maybe they lost 1 game. And then they hear the terrible news that the Houston Rockets had beat the Lakers. The Lakers lost 4-1 to the Rockets. The Rockets, that was like a young Rockets team with Hakeem Olajuwon, Ralph Sampson. But Houston beats the Lakers, which is pretty impressive for Houston's part. And then the Celtics win in 6 over that Houston team. So that's my team. And then one more thing. This is a little off topic, but I think it's an important digression. Is in 1986. So this team, this all-time team, legendary team. They had 5 Hall of Famers. They get the first pick in the draft because, of course, there was a lot of dumb GMs back in the day too. I don't know how they got that pick, but anyway, they get the first pick. They draft Len Bias from Maryland, who a lot of people were saying this guy's like the next Jordan. He looks like Jordan. He was 2 inches taller than Jordan. His college numbers were actually better than Jordan. I think he averaged like over 20 points, like 7 rebounds. Right. So he's basically a longer player who was comparable to Jordan at the time. Very athletic. They draft him, right? And of course, what unfortunately happens literally like 36 hours later is he ends up dying of like an overdose. Which is really just tragic for him, obviously, and his family and everything.
Yeah, I mean, but it really that for our What If episode.
Yeah, but that just completely altered the trajectory of the NBA. Like that following season, that when the 86 Celtics try to repeat, all the players their bodies are breaking down because they had been to like
Walton
finals. Yeah, Walton
for sure.
McHale,
they only got 1
Bird's back. So basically, yeah. So I just think it'd be like, that's off topic, but it'd just be, imagine they draft that all-time team drafts Len Bias, and then
and they still made it back in the 87. They made it to the finals.
Yeah, they do make it to the finals.
This is a good segue into the team I would take next with the number 5th pick. I would probably take them. I think these 2 teams, the 86 Celtics and 87 Lakers, are pretty neck and neck. But now I can go through. So I think the theme with these teams is like I said, motivation is definitely one of them. We see MJ coming off of losing to Orlando in 96, and those Bulls, they were hungry. Same thing with the Warriors, losing 3-1 in 16, coming back. And this is one I see with this with the Celtics team, of course, and this Lakers team as well, this 87 Lakers team. So like you said, they lost in 87 4-1 to the Rockets. The Celtics made it there without them. And that was supposed to be the year when they because I think it was 84 and 85 they played against each other, and they split it, right? They split it. Celtics won one, Lakers won the other, and they wanted to go back. So they were hungry to get back and to beat the Celtics. Another theme we see with these teams is balance, right? And the right balance of these teams, kind of like Kobe and Shaq. Kobe was a little bit younger, not fully in his prime, so Shaq was able to be the man. Same thing with the Warriors team, right? And how everyone was balanced. This team we saw go from Kareem in '86, 38-year-old Kareem Abdul-Jabbar being the leading scorer on that team. So now in '87, Pat Riley gave Magic not only the keys to be the passer on the team, but he said now you're the focal point of the offense. So this team wins 65 games in the regular season. They went 11-1 in the Western Conference, and they met their rivals, the Celtics, in the finals, who they just destroyed in the first two games. Then the Celtics they won game 3. And then right at the end of game 4, Magic hits them with the baby hook to win the game.
The junior hook.
Yeah, they're up 3-1, and then they ended up winning the series 4-2. So, like I said, Magic was the MVP that year. They had James Worthy, of course, another great scorer. They had Twilight Kareem at age 39, who was still putting up 17 points a game. But it was really a lot about this offense and how fast they were moving. Magic was scoring, but they're also passing. Byron Scott was scoring a lot of points for them. Magic was averaging 12 assists. And one last thing was Michael Cooper was the defensive player of the year off their bench.
I didn't know that.
So a great sixth man as defensive player of the year. So just all around a well-balanced team, with, complete from, the star to down to the bench guys as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably the best team that Magic ever played on. And that was his best season too. If you look statistically, he wins the MVP that season. That was in the off season. Pat Riley was like, yeah, I want you to score more. Magic wins the MVP. He averages 24 points, 6 rebounds, and 12 assists. And this was really kind of like the quintessential Showtime Lakers team. Like this was a team. I think they talked about this in the documentary. They sped up. They got a little bit faster instead of getting taller, because there were some moves that they could have made. I think there were some moves that they did make to kind of go a little bit smaller and faster rather than
Rambis. I think it was Rambis too. And another trade they made was they traded in middle of the season for
Michael
Thompson.
Yeah.
So that helped them too.
And we gotta give a shout out to our guy, the Godfather, Pat Riley, for coaching that team.
Of course.
But yeah. So 87 or 87 Lakers, excuse me.
87 Lakers. So I would say, like we said, we're only picking one Magic Johnson team, one Larry Bird team. So I think those are the two I would definitely take. 86 Celtics, 87 Lakers for sure.
No doubt. So now, number 6, this is going to be a controversial pick, but guess what? This is our show. We're Heat fans. I'm picking the 2013 Heat. This is my homer pick. I don't care. I don't honestly, like, if you want to give me the main arguments that if you were to give me like the next 3 or 4 teams on our list, like I think our team's beating them. I don't care what you say. We have LeBron. So
maybe in a series.
Let me give you the rundown. So our team, we have prime LeBron, and 2013 LeBron, in my opinion, that's the best LeBron we've seen. If this hypothetical situation, the Space Jam scenario, where aliens come down and we had a time machine, we need to pick one player from any era, any generation to be the player that we play against, the Space Jam Monstars. I'm taking 2013 LeBron. You could say you want, maybe somewhere between 89 and 92 Jordan, young Jordan. You could
I would
say
actually take
Shaq.
18 LeBron though.
Okay, I was saying you could say maybe you want 18 LeBron. Give me 2013 LeBron. Give me the efficiency. He was shooting 40% from three-point range, and he had a huge stretch in the season where he was shooting like over 60%. It was a lot during the famous 27-game win streak. It
was unreal.
But another thing, we have post-prime but pre-decline Dwayne Wade. So this was, this is one of the best, quote-unquote second bananas in my opinion. A lot of people think Scottie Pippen. You think young Kobe. Or KD and OKC to Russell Westbrook. I'm just kidding. But a lot of people think those guys. I think D-Wade is one of the best, second guys on a team too. And then you have Chris Bosh, who's once again kind of filling in those gaps. He's playing some defense. He's spreading the floor. And when maybe D-Wade is missing a game or two because of his knees that were starting to decline, we have Bosh who can take some offensive weight off of LeBron's shoulders. And then our supporting cast. This is my favorite thing about our team, probably.
Ray Allen after we won the title and then
Exactly. We add Ray Allen. So we add Ray Allen. We had Mario Chalmers, Shane Battier, Udonis Haslem, Birdman, who we added midseason off of the waiver wire. And it was like that was right before our win streak. So we ended up going like we basically won like 40 games and like
I
three
think it was
losses.
like
It was like 39-3 or something crazy.
Oh, I don't know if was it 39? I thought it was like we were 30 and like 3 with him. Or
yeah,
something.
yeah, no, it was something crazy. But then and I just think another thing about this team was our versatility was insane. Like first of all, people always want to credit the Warriors for small ball, but we had lineups on that team where LeBron was the biggest guy in the court. Like during that stretch where we had LeBron. Anyway, we could go big with Udonis and Chris Bosh and Joel Anthony. But then we could go small.
And Chris Anderson, Birdman.
Yeah, Chris Anderson, I forgot. Or we went small sometimes with like Shane Battier playing the 4, and he's not a huge guy. So
no, yeah, he's a small forward.
So that's our team. Now kind of our accomplishments. Sorry, John. I need to get this out.
Go ahead. Keep going.
So we win the 27. We have our famous 27-game win streak in the regular season, which is the second longest streak ever. It's second to the 33-game streak that the 72 Lakers had with Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West. But I went back, I looked at that streak. So you look at that streak, the Lakers streak was 33 games. It was from October 31st, Halloween, until January 9th, so early January. So that's a few months. But guess what? That's very early in the season. Our streak, which we could also make the argument, there was more teams in the league, more talent in the NBA. You know, this is more modern basketball. Our streak was from February to March. When do you see teams peak that high, you know, just don't even lose a game that late in the season, especially a team that had just won have been back-to-back finals. Now it's our third season together, and we're destroying the league late in the season before the finals. Like, that is incredible, and we have to give credit to that. And then, of course, the playoffs, we beat an incredible Spurs team. We're the only team to have beaten Tim Duncan in the finals, or the Spurs in the finals, you know. So that's
true.
An incredible feat. One more. This is my last stat before I give it to you, John. We started this season 24-12. That's 2/3 of our games. That's not that great. We then finish 42-4 the rest of the season. And if you want to add the next 10 playoff games, which I'm going to do, we were over that stretch from that game. I guess that would have been our 37th game of the regular season into the first 2 rounds or the next 10 playoff games. That's 52-5. I don't know if I'm just gonna say it. I think that's probably the best. Has any team ever gone 52-5 over a stretch? Maybe. I could be wrong, but that's crazy.
I'm sure.
Number 16, 2013 Heat.
I'm sure we saw the Warriors in 2016. They might have done it on some stretch. They started off like 24-0. So I want to say they probably ended up going 50.
Yeah, they might have been like.
Because think about it, they had 9 losses that whole season, so they probably did. But you did mention the playoffs, so
yeah.
You know, you sold me, Alex, and you sold me. I think it's a fair pick. The team I'm gonna pick right now, I think has an argument over that team potentially, but I'm a Heat fan, so I'm okay with it. I think the other teams like, you know, the Lakers with Wilt and Jerry West, they won 33 straight games, right? We won 27, and we were chasing that team. Definitely, you know, we're a modern era team. The other thing I would say is, in the playoffs, 2 teams took us to 7 games. We did win. We pulled it out. And, you know, the Pacers were a good young team led by Paul George, right? And Roy Hibbert was having insane stat lines in that playoff series.
It was kind of a bad matchup.
And one more thing is, like, I would say I would give it to us partly because I think the Spurs were a very, very good matchup. And just spoiler alert, that Spurs team, not the 2013 one, but the 2014 team does make this list. So we were going up against one of the best teams too. So the fact that we beat them in 7 games, yeah, you could count that against us, but I do think that was a very, very, very good Spurs team.
But I think you have to credit also the comeback. I mean, no team has been down 5 points with 27 seconds left and then came back, you know, like, so
yeah,
that's a closeout game that we should have lost. And that could have been it. But guess what? We came back, and I think that's something you just add to our resume.
Yeah, maybe most clutch team ever, right? We were about to lose, backs against the wall. What did we do? Down 5.
Mm-hmm.
Alex and I were at the game, and I remember we saw these fans walking out. I turned to my dad. I was 13 years old. I was like, Dad, like, what's going on here? And I didn't want to lose, and, you know, of course we pulled it out. Like, it was like this feeling of being so young, and like, I'm like, what? We're supposed to win. Like, I was like, I didn't know what losing felt like. And we go down, and people are leaving. We see them wheeling out the trophy, right? We see them putting the yellow rope out. And we're like, what's going on here? And, of course, we ended up coming back. The basketball gods were, they were in our favor.
They were on our side.
So this team, now that I'm going to have next, I think there's an argument to be made for them. I'm picking them because I think they're an awesomely underrated team in history. And that is the Bad Boy Pistons. And I'm picking the 1989 team. Like we said, we're only picking one version of them. So the fun thing about this team is that they're not really at the top of anyone's flashy list. Kind of similar to the Spurs, which we'll talk about. But they won 63 games in the regular season. But then in the playoffs, this is what was crazy. So they go 15-2, which obviously is excellent. But they swept the Celtics in the first round. Obviously, it's late. So they beat Larry Bird, and it's late in that Celtics team's
89, very, very late.
But they sweep that team 3-0. Then they also beat Michael Jordan 4-2. Those are the only two games that they lost were to the MJ and the Bulls. And then they beat Magic and Kareem in the NBA Finals, and they swept them. So super fun team that literally no team can say they beat Bird, Magic, Kareem, and MJ. Those four top 5 guys, I guess, ever.
Probably top 10.
Or I don't know where exactly on our list we have. Yeah, so right now. But at the time, those 4 guys were probably 1 through 5. I guess you add Bill Russell in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Those guys were probably all in the top 5 at the time. So they went 15-2. And this team, I keep talking about, there's this theme of balance, right? That Heat team too you mentioned, just balance with role players and stars. And Wade had to take the back step or a step back for LeBron to be number 1, right? And so we see that with this team, just led by Isaiah Thomas, who wasn't the highest scorer on this team, right? But he was averaging the most assists. The highest scorer on this team was Adrian Dantley, who was averaging 18 a game. But you go down, they had 6
I think they traded him, though. I think they traded him before the playoffs.
That was the next season, I believe.
No, I think they traded him during the season, John.
Oh, okay.
They traded him for Mark Aguirre. But no, yeah, early in the season, he was scoring a lot, and then they traded him for Mark Aguirre.
Right. They did. He was scoring, and then Mark Aguirre was averaging 15. So they had this team is stacked, and watching that Bad Boys Pistons documentary, it's so awesome to see the way they were revered. Everybody hated them, and I'm sure if I was an NBA fan at the time, I would hate them as well, with Mahorn and Bill Laimbeer, just all those hard fouls in the middle of the paint. We don't like these guys because for example, if we play them in our era, when Wade and LeBron are in Detroit, we don't like that Bill Laimbeer is beating down our star, and I don't want to see my guy get injured, right? So that's the reason that this team was so hated. But another thing, this team repeats, right? Joe Dumars was the MVP this year. The following year, it was Isaiah. But so this team repeated. But I recently saw a tweet the other day, and it said, it was Isaiah, "I still believe we were the first team in our era to win 3 in a row. Let it be known." And he retweeted something that the Detroit Pistons tweeted, their Twitter account. They said the 88 finals, a turned ankle and a questionable whistle cost the Pistons a shot at another title. So let me just paint this picture here. So we got Lakers versus the Bad Boy Pistons in the 88 finals, right? We got Isaiah. So now the Pistons are up 3-2, and it's game 6. Isaiah literally breaks his ankle, I believe, right? So tweaks his ankle. It's messed up. And in the Bad Boys 30 for 30, they're painting it Isaiah went down. We all thought we were gonna lose, whatever. And I was like, oh, what? Did he hit a great shot at the end, or did he have 5 points or something? He had 25 points in that quarter, in the third quarter of that game. It's unreal. And he's hobbling. He's going up for a layup, falling down, and he's running back on defense, and he's limping. It's one of the coolest things to watch, just for any basketball fans. If you're younger and you we're not alive for that series like Alex and I were, I definitely recommend you go watch it. That's an excellent game. And right at the end, the Pistons are up I think 1 point, and Kareem puts up a shot, gets fouled at the buzzer, but it was such a ticky-tack. It was a bad call. With 1 second left, with the championship on the line, you do not call that. It was literally Bill Laimbeer grazed his hand, okay? And they put Kareem at the line, right? And if he misses both free throws, Pistons win it. So the game would have been over if Lambeer didn't move his finger a centimeter forward and the ref makes that call.
Yeah.
But instead, they call a foul call. Kareem hits 2 free throws, and then guess what? They go to Game 7, and the Lakers win in Game 7 because, sorry, Isaiah Thomas has a broken ankle, or turned ankle.
Here's what I'll say, John.
That team really did. They really did. Like, they were so
They
close to
didn't. They didn't. If it was on the back end, I would maybe give it to you. But when it's on the front end, like, do they win in 89 if they win in 88? Maybe not. Or maybe they
Perhaps
do, but
not.
then do they win in 90? And
Listen.
then – so that's my first thing with what you were saying. I kind of don't agree with retroactively giving them the first three-peat.
Fine. I don't give it to them. But I'm just saying, they were lit – and that goes back to my argument about hunger, right? That 89 team was so hungry because – the feeling they had, and they talk about it in the documentary, and it really is like heartbreaking. Like they felt like we did it. We won. No one liked us. They wanted to see MJ. They wanted to see Bird and Magic, but we won. And they were so hungry for that.
Yeah.
The next season, they ended up winning in 89.
Got to give them credit. Shout out to the Bad Boy Pistons. Great job coming back. It is a great story. Great. That documentary is good too. I haven't seen it in a few years, but and they're for sure one of the all-time great teams. I think this might be a little high, and here's why I think so. When I actually look at their accomplishments, you look at their the main feat, which is this is kind of when you just get to the meat and potatoes, why are this team so great? You say, okay, they beat 4 top 10, pretty undisputed top 10 guys. They beat Jordan, they beat Magic, they beat Larry, and they beat Kareem. Magic and Kareem are on the same team. But anyway, they beat 3 teams with all-time guys. Let me actually break that down. For round 1, you have Larry and the Celtics. That's the number 8 seed. They're 42-40. The Celtics is broken down. Larry Bird is at the very end of his career. So that doesn't mean as much in my opinion. Yeah, you beat Larry.
It happened. It happened. They swept them. They did what they were supposed to do. They swept them.
Conference finals, you play Jordan and the Bulls. That's the 89 Bulls, which is only a 45-win team. They're a 6 seed, and I think it's a 6 seed. Might have been a 5 seed. No, it was a 6 seed. It's pre-Phil Jackson and pre-triangle offense. So yes,
they were still great. This is still MVP Michael Jordan.
You have 2 great players, but it's still a 45-win team. So that's what I'll say. And then in the finals, yes, it's great that they avenged their loss in the previous season. They beat the Lakers with Magic and Kareem, 2 great players. But this is actually gonna sound insane. That was the Lakers' 7th finals in 8 years. Or if you want to cut a different way, it was their 8th finals in 10 years. So, yes, is it great that they beat this?
That's a great team. They beat a great team.
They beat a great team that had been to all these finals. But, we talk about, especially in today's day and age, you talk about load management. We look at LeBron. He played 8 straight, all this stuff. 7 finals in 8 years or 8 finals in 10 years. Those guys were pretty cooked.
And they swept them. That's what
they swept them. And that was when – then Kareem retires the year after. Kareem literally retires right then. So it's an incredible win. You have to give them credit. But that's just a little pushback against having them.
Listen, if you want to say their opponents weren't great, that's fine. Maybe they weren't the best opponents they've ever had. But guess what? They dominated. They won 63 in the regular season. And then in the playoffs, they only lose 2 games when they go 15-2 against everyone they played. So, yeah, maybe Larry wasn't that great and the Lakers weren't as great that year. And I guess they beat the Bulls with MVP Jordan. So yeah, it's still they dominated 15-2 in the playoffs.
For sure. Okay, and maybe the team that I would put over them is this next team, or maybe not. Whatever, it's up in the air. Is the 1972 LA Lakers. So obviously this is in the 70s. You can't give too much of a deep dive, too much information because we didn't watch it. There's not a lot of film, but that team, you have basically what the 60s and 70s version of Shaq and Kobe was. You have Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain. So they're 2 superstars. And that's probably, we've been talking about these, 1-2 punches. You go with, Durant and Curry. You have Shaq and Kobe. You have Michael and Scotty. Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain are right up there on that list. Statistically as well. I don't have stats to prove it. But if you look at the combinations of points and the wins and all that, Jerry West and Wilt was dominant. Then their other like notable guy they had on their team was Gail Goodrich. I think he was a kind of like a shooter. But their accomplishments. What I mentioned earlier, the 33 game win streak, which is the longest streak that no team has ever won, 33 straight games in the regular season.
Yeah,
And
in a
then
single season as
they
well.
also have the third best record of all time. They had 69 wins. So you have the 73 Warriors, the 73 win Warriors, 72 win Bulls, and then 69 win Lakers. This team, and then
Yeah.
they go 12-3 in the playoffs. So I think they deserve some credit on this list for those. They've done things that still teams haven't done. So it's obviously an all-time great team. You have all-time great players. One thing I do want to say, kind of one of the I think the best player who had never won a ring is Elgin Baylor, who's basically like he's the reason why he's so famous and why he's so great was he was really like the first player to kind of really use his jumping and athleticism in ways that we've seen like now we've seen LeBron do it, we've seen Jordan do it, and like Dr. J kind of like Elgin Baylor was like the guy who kind of set the path. He blazed the trail for them.
I guess that wasn't a center too. Most of these big tall centers weren't jumping like that because they were so tall they didn't need to. Whereas Elgin was a small forward.
Yeah, he's like kind of the first guy that really uses athleticism in that way, and he was on this team too, but he then retires I think like mid-season because his body was breaking down, whatever. And he was 0-8 in the finals.
He was just sad of being 0-8, and you know what? West was like 0-7 as well, right? And he ends up going 1-7.
Yeah, but it's just crazy to me that like Elgin literally could have just hung on, but his like, you know what, like it was time for him to go, and he dipped out, even though he could have just got this easy ring.
It is weird,
and maybe he's remembered differently if he gets that one ring, you know.
Yeah, definitely a team that we don't know much about as people being born in the year 2000 when this team's prime was 30 years ago when they played. So yeah, we don't know much, but they definitely deserve spots just from the sheer statistical dominance, like you said. 69 games won in the regular season, and then 33 games in a row. I remember first hearing about this team in 2013 when the Miami Heat won 22 in a row, 23 in a row, 24 in a row, and it's like, all right, can they catch 33? And oh man, we were so close. But again, that's why it's so great, because this is one of the records that is probably might never get broken,
Absolutely. And that means something.
Not in the competitive league that it is today. So yeah, great team that deserves a spot on this list. Next, like we said, we only take one iteration of these teams. So for me, like now you see we have a few different Laker teams in there. We have, a LeBron team, Magic team, a Larry Bird team, the MJ team, the Warriors. And the next team that I'm thinking, I'm like, who haven't we put in here yet? It has to be the Spurs. And that's why I'm picking the 2014 Spurs. You could say, 07 Spurs were great and like more, and better. And they obviously swept the finals. This team went 4-1 in the finals against the Miami Heat. But I think it's such an interesting team to look at, like historically. If you just look at what they did that season. Okay, so they got Duncan, Parker, and Ginobili, like their same old, just great trio, the big three, right? But now they got young Kawhi coming in and being the Finals MVP of that team. So now they got this young, athletic, great defensive player, 22-year-old stud coming on this team and just coming into his own more. In 2013, obviously, we saw him. He was a little too young. He missed a free throw in the end of Game 6.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of cost him that championship. And this is now like his coming out party. I'm a star and I'm here. And look what we've seen him do since. So this is Kawhi coming in. And another fun thing is like I talked about like motivation and balance. So obviously this team, high motivation after losing in Game 6.
Probably they got as close to a championship as anyone's gotten without actually winning.
Right.
You're really 5 seconds away. Or not,
yeah.
Excuse me, not 5. You're 27 seconds
20
away.
seconds away.
2 free throws away, really.
2 free. One.
Oh, yeah,
Let's say
one.
Kawhi makes it. We're up 4. Or, I'm sorry, they're up 4. The Heat can't really come back from that by hitting a 3. So they were so close. They had ultimate hunger, but they were so smart. So this is something that's funny. Look, Tony Parker played 68 games that season, okay? Duncan, 74 games. Kawhi, 66, and Ginobili, 68. They didn't care about the regular season, but these guys played only around mid-60s games, like 66 to 74 games. So they rested these games. And I remember, this is something Popovich always got a lot of heat for, was like they'd be going to play the Heat, and it's like, Parker, Duncan, Leonard, and Ginobili got sent home, and like people want their money back. The NBA fined them, right? And this is something they would do, but guess what? They still won 62 games, right? And this team just showed like they were never in question. Like, can we still do it? They they might have dropped games when, in the regular season when it didn't matter as much. And then it comes to the playoffs. They had a 7-game series against Dirk and the Mavericks against the 8th seed, right? And that was the team that took them the farthest in that series. So, but it was never really in question whether or not they were going to win once they got to the playoffs, because even though you see them go 7 games with an 8th seed, a Mavericks team led by Dirk Nowitzki, like the team was still, it was never in question. They had home court, and Vince Carter had to hit a game winner at one point, a game-winning three-pointer for the Mavericks to win a game at one point. And, so it was never in question. They had control of that series, and they blew the team out in Game 7. Then we see 4-1 against the Blazers, 4-2 against the Thunder, and Tim Duncan set in the conference finals. And after that series in Game 6, we hear Tim Duncan say, like, the craziest thing you'll see, old, quiet Tim Duncan ever say. He says, the interviewer says, yeah, so you guys lost last year to the Heat. How do you guys feel going this year? And he said, yeah, we lost. We won't do it again. And everyone's like, everyone's losing their minds. I can't believe Tim Duncan.
He said, I just remember, he said, we're going to get it done.
Yeah, it's like, we're going to do it again. I was like, I was scared. As a Heat fan.
Heck yeah, we were scared.
And they come in, and this is one thing as a Heat fan, I can't talk about this team without mentioning they cranked up the AC, they didn't crank up the AC. They cranked up the Heat and broke their AC in San Antonio in the middle of June. And obviously, we know how that game ends. The Heat were on way to win that game. We were in control in the fourth quarter, and LeBron goes out with cramps, and that team, Danny Green, hits a bunch of threes. They just go off.
Well, that's what John. I don't think it's funny. You haven't really mentioned about this team. Is the craziest thing in the one of the best stats is this was a record margin. If you add up all the wins that they had in a record margin of wins in the finals. If you add up no team has won by, whatever it was,
right,
plus 100 points. I don't know. And they also shot 46% from 3-point range. That team, and this is my one night. I was going to say memory, but it's really a nightmare when I think about it, is how hot these shooters got. You had Danny Green, you had Gary Neal, you had Patty Mills, you had all these guys just did not miss their 3-pointers.
It was heartbreaking, and then we know how that ends. LeBron ends up leaving, going to Cleveland the next season.
And they're also a team where you don't look at that team and say, and like for most of the teams on the list, you look at them and there's probably 1 or 2 guys on that team where you can say, okay, like that's why they were great. Shaq, MJ, LeBron, whoever it is. This team wasn't really one dominant player. It was the fact that they're really their whole team, not just 1 through 5. It was like 1 through 9, 1 through 10. They just had guys who were just come in, they would do their work, they would play defense, they would hit their threes, and then they would go out and I just hate talking about it, but they were obviously a very dominant team.
And the last thing to say is like that was one of the greatest just passing teams. Like they were kind of ahead of they kind of knew what was coming with the 3-point line. And even if you look at how many threes they took, it wasn't that many, but they were going there with the direction of the style of their play, passing and kicking and, slash and kick with these 3-point shooters all surrounding, Duncan in the middle. And of course, Tony Parker was so nice when he would just drive in, dish it out to all these shooters that they had. I mean, they really had some snipers on that team. And in that 2014 finals, I just remember Boris Diaw was averaging like 7-8 assists. This is like a big kind of fat guy, honestly, like player. And they were just passing better than any team we've ever seen, honestly. And they were playing basketball, as beautiful as it can be played. So you have to have this team, in my opinion, as the best Spurs team.
Yeah. I think that basketball is pretty ugly, actually. And so, number 10 team is the last team on our list. There's a couple ways you could go with it. I wasn't sure if I wanted to put one of the Bill Russell teams on here or, there's a lot of kind of older teams to throw on there. There's maybe a Kareem and Oscar Robertson Bucks team. But I get the team that I kind of settled for, because I don't think anything jumps out to me, is the 1983 Sixers. And this is a team they have, the 2 notable players they had were, in my opinion, 2 easily top 20 guys. You have Moses Malone and you have Dr. J, Julius Erving, on the team. They also had their next other really good player. I think he was a point guard, was Andrew Toney, or it might have been a shooting guard. He was a stud. But just looking at those guys, you have Moses was a 3-time MVP, and then Julius Erving had won a couple more MVPs in the ABA, and then had won one NBA MVP. So those are two obviously very good players. Their coach was a Sixers legend, Billy Cunningham, good coach. For their accomplishments, here it is. They won 65 games in the regular season. And then before the playoffs, Moses Malone, they had just lost. The 1982 finals, they lose to the Lakers. They lose to Magic and Kareem. Very tough loss for them. I don't think they had Moses that year. They trade for Moses, and Moses before the playoffs says, faux, which was basically, we're going to sweep the whole playoffs. We're going to win 4 games in the first round, 4 games in the second round, and then that was when there was only 3 rounds, and then 4 games in the finals, and that's going to be it. So they did not go faux. They actually did 4, then they went 4-1, and then they did sweep Magic and Kareem in the finals.
Faux 5-0.
Yeah, faux 5-0. But so that team was obviously very, very dominant team. They were you look at the 80s, you look at all the teams that were winning the championships where it was Lakers, Celtics, and then at the very end you have that one championship that the Pistons won, or I guess 2 if you want to count that 90 championship. But other than that, the only other team that was able to win a championship or go to multiple finals was the Sixers. And the Sixers team, they win 1983 finals and they get revenge for the 82 loss that they had the prior year. So, John, actually, you know what? Let me try to run down this list really quick to give it kind of an outline. We went 2017 Warriors, 2001 Lakers, the 1996 Bulls, the 1986 Celtics, the 1987 Lakers, the 2013 Heat, then the 1989 Pistons, the 1972 Lakers, the 2014 Spurs, and the 1983 Sixers to round out the list. And those are the top 10 greatest teams of all time.
Well, lastly, Alex, I just kind of feel bad. Bill Russell he's a player who is always like kind of outspoken on this stuff when like people don't have him on their Rushmore, and he's like, what else could I have done? I won 11 championships. I won 5 MVPs, and no one thinks I'm one of the greatest ever. Like, I'm the GOAT. Like, who's MJ? And I kind of feel bad. We didn't have one of those teams on, and I get it. There was like 9 teams in the league. There was only like 2 playoff series for them to win. Mm-hmm. So it's hard for us to say, oh, this team was just dominant and they really did do that every year. So I feel bad, but I feel like we kind of should have thrown one Bill Russell Celtics team in, because this is also at the point where if you were the best team, you got the number 1 pick in the draft. Mm-hmm. So they just kept stockpiling all these young guys, and now it's like Havlicek, Russell, and all these studs. And they were in the 60s. I haven't won one game from them, but they were dominant. They were great.
If you do look also at, like, right now, I think that team, if you look up just which team had the most Hall of Famers, I think they had like between 8 and 10 Hall of Famers on their team. Like from Russell, they had Havlicek, Bob Cousy, Sam Jones. They had a lot of great players. But I guess the thing here is if we're picking one season and there wasn't one season that really stuck out. Maybe there was, but also we're ignorant, 2000 babies. So can't go too far into the history books for that.
And that's the thing is whoever listens to this isn't going to be like, oh my gosh, it left off the Celtics from the 60s, because no one listening to this was alive then, I guess.
We'll see. Hopefully, yeah, if you have a problem with our list, let us know.
Yeah.
But anyway, that kind of wraps it up. It's been this is a fun episode to do. Hopefully the next coming weeks before the NBA season starts or restarts on July 31st, we can get in a couple more of these kind of random NBA topics with maybe some deep dive, maybe a what ifs episode. If not, I'm sure we'll do that down the line as well. But yeah, it's been a good time. John, thank you for being on this great episode with me.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening. Have a good one.